Okay, so let's open with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, be with us this evening as we continue our study on Genesis. Help us to understand the narrative and the truths that lie within those narratives for our lives. We ask for your guidance, and we ask for your wisdom. We ask for your presence. Amen. So, tonight we're going to start a new narrative, a new story, group of stories within the book of Genesis. So far we've looked at Abraham narrative, the Adam or the creation narrative. Then we looked at the Noah and the flood narrative. Then we looked at the Abraham narrative, briefly at an Isaac narrative, but we'll get some more of that tonight. And now we're going to start into the Jacob narrative. And it may be now the narratives get more interesting in a certain way, because what we've seen as we've gone through Genesis is that the characters become more three-dimensional for us. They become more complex. We see they become even more human to us. Yes, the characters throughout Genesis so far have been human, and they've had human tendencies, but we see more the humanity in deeper depth as we go along, including the flaws. So, we'll review the central affirmations that we review every session. God creates creation and has a specific purpose for it. The relationship between God and creation develops through speaking and listening. God's word to creation is a sovereign call, but it's a kind of call which invites obedience rather than demands allegiance. God loves creation, but creation refuses to let God be God. And finally, the relationship between God and creation is marked by tension between God's purposes and creation's resistance to God's purposes. So, we start off with the story of Jacob, and there's a very good introduction, and I just want to read that in your resource book. And I just want to read through that again. The Christian church in Corinth had its problems. The members had divided themselves into factions. They were even suing each other in secular courts. One man was living with his mother-in-law. Some were disrupting the worship service with tongues speaking. Others were getting drunk and overindulging themselves before the celebration of the Lord's Supper. Yet, in spite of their obvious faults, Paul addressed these people as saints and reminded them that God did not always act in expected ways. As he put it, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. Much the same way, the Jacob narrative in Genesis makes no attempt to cover up Jacob's flaws. In fact, one may get the idea that the writer of these chapters relishes his role as a revealer of Jacob's warts. Jacob is a rascal, pure and simple. For that very reason, however, he seems more true to life than some other biblical characters. Read Genesis 25:23. Notice that God chooses Jacob and gives him a destiny. Also note that we are not given a reason why God upsets the natural order of the firstborn. Now skim Genesis 25:29 through 34 and 27:1 through 45, which will give you insight into Jacob's character. The tension between God's commitment to Jacob and Jacob's troubled life lies at the heart of this narrative. God's choosing of Jacob is both a burden and a blessing, as we shall see. In this chapter and the two which follow, we shall examine some of the key stories in the Jacob tradition which will illustrate Jacob's conflicts with the family and with God. Okay. So, what do you think of that statement that comes from Paul, that God chooses the weak to shame the strong, the foolish to shame the wise? Have any thoughts about what that means for us? Yeah. For Paul, it means that it's not us that is achieving righteousness. It's God bringing righteousness out of us. And very often, what happens to show that God is in control, or God is God, we see that leadership or the wisdom come out of fools. We see strength come out of weaklings. We see righteousness come out of the sinful. We see God bringing out of the very people that we wouldn't think it would come out of. And what that shows is that God, first of all, God sees what we don't see. And secondly, God can achieve what we can't imagine God achieves. And thirdly, we don't have the power to control that. And you're right, Marilyn, that can be very humbling for us. And how that's affected the church throughout the ages is that there's been two ways of looking at it. One is more fatalistic, and one is more hopeful. The fatalistic tends to go the predestination route that says it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what choices. Yes, God says we have free will, but we don't really have free will because God's preordained everything. And so everything we choose is what God has already preordained for us to choose. And it doesn't matter. We can go ahead and do whatever we want because God's going to go ahead and do whatever God wants. And our free will is just an illusion. And the other is that the more hopeful vision says the exact opposite. It says, with God, our destiny isn't set by is not necessarily set by traditional standards. That God can do miracles. That God can work out of things that traditionally or even nature would say couldn't be possible, God can make possible. So that, and rather than that being a place for us to despair, that becomes a place for us to hope, because we can choose, so we can, with God and with God's blessing, make our own destiny. The only thing it requires of us is to be in partnership with God. I bring this up because this is kind of part of the tension that is going to go on throughout all these narratives that we're looking at tonight. With Jacob, is what we see in Jacob is this constant battle between chosen by God and destined by God, yet having to always fight for it. Nothing comes easy to Jacob. He has to fight. He has to plan. He has to plot. He has to almost cheat. He has to do all these things. Even though he's chosen by God, destined by God, he has to do all these things in order to make that destiny happen. So what's going on is a battle between what's happening between Jacob and the other characters, and we can get lost in that story, and forget that there's another contest going on, and that is what's going on with Jacob and God. Because there's a part of Jacob that says, okay, I believe in God and God has a destiny for me, but God ain't helping me, so I'm going to have to do this myself. So there's this constant tension between whether am I blessed by God or am I not? And there's this tension between him and the world saying, okay, God has chosen me, but all these people, but I have to, but the world is telling me that I'm left out and that I'm not chosen. And what do I do with that? So those two conflicts between God, Jacob and the world, and Jacob even with God, are two themes that are going through all the stories of Jacob. And it's part what makes him such a fascinating character within the book of Genesis. Right. Yeah, we're going to get into all that, actually. That's what makes these stories so fascinating and for me, almost fun, because you get into all these almost intrigues and these questions and all these things that are going on that just, it's a fascinating story. First of all, a little background is that the Jacob stories, all the material from Jacob all the way through Joseph, there's a lot of different stories coming in, and different kinds of stories. There's certain kind of just sibling or family narratives that are coming in, whether it be with Jacob and his brother, or Jacob and his uncle, then later Jacob with his sons and Joseph with his brothers, that are all just like family dynamics and continuing the story. But there's also other narratives coming in where Jacob is having a theophany experiences where God is, one is he's seeing this ladder up to the heavens, And we'll see that in the next chapter when he's going off on his way to be with Laban, to live with his uncle Laban. He has this vision of the ladder to heaven. And then when he's done with Laban and he's having to meet his brother Esau, which is even later, then he's wrestling with this angel of God. So there's these theophany experiences where he's having experiences with divine. So and then also there's a birth narrative, or the narrative of Isaac stuck in there too, and the birth narratives as well, of barrenness. And so the scholarship of where all these stories came from is that they mostly all came from the northern kingdom. It would be what would be called the Elohist materials that we have throughout the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible. I know I've gone through this before, but you have 4 different sources. One is the Yahwist, and then the Elohist, and then the Deuteronomist, and then the priestly. And these two make up what is called the old epic narrative. And they make up most of the stories that we get of Genesis through Exodus, through Numbers and Leviticus and Numbers, those stories. And then, and these two, this is the southern kingdom. This is all the stories for this part of the narrative. There's a group of stories that come from the southern part of Israel, and then there's stories that come from the northern part. And they had there's a distinct difference between the two, because they had different ways of speaking about God, and they also had different viewpoints of what was important in worshiping God. Most scholars believe that most of this part of the narrative, Genesis, comes from that northern part. I don't know how interesting that is to you, but to us, have biblical studies, that's interesting. So, let's go ahead and read the first part of the narrative. So, introductory reflections. So the next slide. So, Diane, can you look up 1 Corinthians 27 through 29? This may be what we've been just talking about, but if it is, we'll just revisit it and move on. Sorry. 1 Corinthians 1, 27 through 29.
But God chose what is foolish in the world to
Okay.
shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong.
Okay, that's what we talked about before. So, 2 general affirmations are clear from the narrative. God has chosen and destined Jacob in a special way. What is clear out of this, the narrative that we're going to begin reading from the very beginning, is that God has chosen and destined Jacob. And the second affirmation is it's a juxtaposition of that special designation in Jacob's life of conflict that is the mainspring of the narrative, or the motif or the theme that's going to run throughout the narrative. It's the juxtaposition or the jamming together of God specially designating Jacob as special, and Jacob having conflict. It's that jamming those together that's going to be the tension or the creative tension within this narrative. So, in the pre-birth destiny, and this is where we're going to get to what you were talking about, Diane. So we're looking at Genesis 25. Verse 19 through 28. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in the tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So first of all, we have, within this part of the narrative, we have, once again, barrenness coming up as an issue. Barrenness was an issue for Abraham and Sarah, and now it's an issue for Isaac and Rebekah. But where Abraham and Sarah, it's handled different, because with Abraham and Sarah, they had to just remain faithful. They just had to believe in the promise. Isaac and Rebekah, their reaction or their handling was more active, in that they were active. Isaac was actively praying about Rebekah. So in both cases, both Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah, what the narratives tell us is that the issue of barrenness is not a physiological one. It's not cured by doctors. It's a theological one, where God is expecting either one, faithfulness, or active prayer. And so Isaac and Rebekah, Isaac prays for Rebekah. Rebekah conceives. It's a miracle. The pregnancy is wanted, but it's not without its difficulties. Rebekah feels it right away, to the point it gets to her going to God and says, why do I even live? So it must have been painful, because she has within her two twins that are actually fighting each other within her. It's not just the kick of a child. It was war inside of her. And God doesn't exactly comfort her, does he? He doesn't say, oh, it's okay, you'll be okay, it's fine. God actually confirms her fears. He says, you have two nations at war within you, and they're going to be at war. And not only that, but the result is going to be different than you would expect. Because one's going to be stronger and older, and one would think that the stronger and the older will be the leader, will be the more favored. But that ain't going to happen. It's the younger, the weaker, that's going to win out. And the stronger and the older is going to serve the younger and the weaker. So Rebekah is given this shock, this double shock of, one, that the trouble that she's feeling inside of her isn't going to get any better. And two, everything's going to be upended. Everything she expects is going to be upended. It's going to be different. And if you notice, even in the names, Esau means hairy. Also can mean strong. And these things at this time was a sign of leadership or virility, right? In the time that that this is going on, Esau would have been seen as the most attractive. He would have been, from birth, the most likely to succeed. Jacob literally means heel. When we call someone a heel, what do we mean? Is it a good term? It's somebody who is just usually somebody you can't trust. Somebody that might stab you in the back. Somebody that is less than. So from the very beginning, they are defined in society as certain qualities that would seem to be their destinies. Even by their very names, they would seem to be destined to live certain lives. And for that end, who favors Esau? Isaac. Why?
He's a hunter. Says he likes.
Because he likes the game. Esau is strong. He's a skillful hunter. So Isaac sees in Esau those things that he always considered to be strengths. What makes a man a man. And he likes the game that he gets. So Esau brings him what he needs, gives him what he needs. So why does Rebekah favor Jacob?
I think it's because she went to, it says here that she went to inquire of God what was going on. Why am I living in?
Yeah, that's the major part of it, is God told her that the elder shall serve the younger, or the stronger shall serve. So she sees in Jacob what Isaac can't see, is unable to see, and that God intends something for Jacob. But this is also tends to be, I may be generalizing a little bit much too, but this also tends to be a very maternal thing. Very often, mothers see in children what sometimes fathers can't see. And sometimes, when there's more, the mothers can see in a child who seems that the father may be frustrated because they maybe are less strong, or they don't have the same qualities. It's a mother who sees them that, don't you see? He's sensitive, he's smart, he's kind. So sometimes that maternal instinct, there's maybe some of that maternal instinct that is also alive in Rebekah. That's not emphasized so much. What we see more in Rebekah in the story is more of almost a cold, calculating shrewdness to help Jacob get what Jacob needs. But it may be more complicated. There may be more of a human dimension in it than simply God said, Jacob is my favorite one. What raises a question in this is why God chooses Jacob. And we're not specifically given a reason. We can take the 1 Corinthians passage and read back into it, but if we read the text by itself, we don't see a reason why God has chosen Jacob to be the favored one. It flies in the face of convention. It seems inscrutable. It seems to be not expected. If we read the text by itself, the reader of that text in that time would be surprised. Well, why would God choose Jacob? Esau is the obvious choice. He's a firstborn. He's a stronger one. He's a skillful hunter. He's a provider. Why wouldn't God choose him? He's the obvious choice. So to the initial reader of the text, the choice of God or the action of God seems to be inscrutable or hard to understand. Let's move on. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is my birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and he rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So a couple things to note, first of all, is that the word Esau means hairy, and it also means red. The word that is used to describe the stew it's described as a red stew. And Edom is also red. So we have this, they all have the same root word. So Esau becomes Edom, or the man of red stew, almost, or the red man. His hair was red. He was red. He came out of the womb red. He ate red stew when he sold his birthright. So there's a lot of play on words there that is talking about the origin of Edom, the word Edom, and later on when you read Edomites, you almost have a picture of who they are and how they look. Okay. But the text begins and ends with two statements about Esau. The first statement in the first verse is that Esau comes in from the field and he's famished. What does famished means? Very, very hungry. Hungry to the point that you think you're going to die. So, and it ends with Esau despised his birthright. So what we see here is, first, the difference between Esau and Jacob is, at first, the first glance is psychological. Esau is impulsive. I'm hungry, I want fed, I don't care what I have to do in order to get fed. I want what I want right now. I need it, and whatever happens is going to happen. Esau doesn't plan ahead, he just acts. It's probably what makes him a skillful hunter is, yes, he can track an animal, but when the time comes, he doesn't have any fear, he just strikes, right? He's got that impulsive, acting personality.
Why didn't he just beat up his son, beat up on his brother, things too? That's what kids would do.
Yeah, normally.
Because he was strong.
Because I don't know, maybe it was the fact that something still needed to be done to the stew and he didn't know what to do. The kitchen was Jacob's domain, and Esau felt uncomfortable there. More than likely because he thought that was women's work. So Jacob, he thinks long term. Jacob could be hungry for all we know. Maybe it took him a long time to make that stew. And he was getting hungry and hungrier, but he could wait because he knew what he wanted. And he could plan and he could plot and he could make that happen. He wasn't going to act out of impulse. He was going to be careful. Why? Because he had to. He couldn't get things by being impulsive, and he wasn't strong enough. He didn't have the position to, so he had to plot and plan. He sees an opportunity, and so he makes it work for him. So, but it's more than psychological. The difference are also theological. Because Esau is living only in the moment, more than likely, Esau's relationship with God is impulsive as well. More likely, Esau's prayers are, God, make this arrow true. Or, God, I'm hungry, give me something to eat. Where Jacob's relationship with God is more, who am I? How am I supposed to live in this world when I'm the weak one? When I'm not the favored one? When I'm the one that lives in the tents with the women? What's my role in this world? What do you have for me? Jacob, by position, has to be more philosophical and theological than Esau has to be, because Esau is given a certain position that Jacob doesn't have. Okay, then in the next chapter, we have a break from the Jacob story by going back to Isaac. Now there was a famine in the land besides the former famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar to King Abimelech of the Philistines. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Settle in the land that I shall show you. Reside in this land as an alien, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will fulfill the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and will give to you, your offspring, all these lands. And all the nations of the earth shall gain blessing for themselves through your offspring, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." For he was afraid to say, "My wife," thinking, or else the man of the place might kill me for the sake of Rebekah, because she is attractive in appearance. When Isaac had been there a long time, King Abimelech of the Philistines, looking out a window, and saw him fondling his wife Rebekah. So Abimelech called for Isaac and said, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say she is my sister?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought I might die because of her." Abimelech said, What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall be put to death." Isaac sowed seed in that land, and in the same year reaped 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich. He prospered more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and a great household, so that the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped up and filled the earth with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us. You have become too powerful for us." So Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Isaac dug again the wells of waters that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the names that his father had given him. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herders of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herders, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also, so he called it Sitnah. He moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it, so he called it Rehoboth, saying, "Now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." From there he went up to Beersheba, and that very night the Lord appeared to him and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you and make your offspring numerous for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Ahuzah, his advisor, and Phicol, the commander of his army. Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to see me, seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you?" They said, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we say, let there be an oath between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, so that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord." So he made them a feast, and they ate and they drank. In the morning they rose early and exchanged oath, and Isaac set them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. That same day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug. And they said to him, "We have found water." He called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city Beersheba to this day. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. What we see in this passage is, first of all, we see some similarities with the Abraham narrative. We see the patriarchal promise. We see the promise that is made to Abraham being also made to Isaac, which is, you will have a multiple of descendants. You will be blessed. There's also a charge to go to a certain land and live as an alien. So Isaac does, and we also see a similar motif where Isaac does the same thing his father does. He presents his wife as his sister so that he might be safe from other men who want her as for their own. What is different, however, is how this is all treated. First of all, is the reaction of the people when they find out that Rebekah is not his sister, but his wife. Where in Abraham, they had to be told by God. With Isaac, they see it with their own eyes. Where in Abraham, they had to almost pledge tribute in order to gain favor with God. With Isaac, they merely have to tell their men, leave him alone. Isaac prospers because God blesses Isaac. Isaac settles in a place, finds a home, because God has blessed Isaac. What is important here is the idea of blessing. There is a reiteration of blessing. The blessing becomes more and more powerful as the narratives of Genesis has continued. God has continued to shower blessing on each person that we met through Genesis, but that blessing becomes more significant with each story that's being told. And with Isaac, that blessing becomes transformational, where he is no longer the child of a foreigner traveling in a foreign land, but he is a mighty force which other powerful nations come and ask favor, ask to be in agreement with him, because they are afraid of that they see him as uniquely blessed by God. All this story seems to be out of place, and in many ways it is. But what makes it significant in its placement is it sets up the next story, which is Jacob's getting of the blessing, which we'll move to next. So the blessing of Jacob. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called his elder son Esau and said to him, "My son." And he answered, here I am. And he said, "See, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. Then prepare for me savory food such as I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may bless you before I die." Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me game and prepare for me savory food to eat, that I may bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my word as I command you. Go to the flock and get me 2 choice kids, so that I may prepare from them savory food, so that your father such as he likes. And you shall take it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies.' But Jacob says to his mother Rebekah, excuse me, 'Look, my brother is a hairy man, and I am a man of smooth skin. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him, and bring a curse on myself and not a blessing.' His mother said to him, 'Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my word and go and get them for me.' So he went and got them and brought them to his mother. And his mother prepared savory food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of her elder son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. And she put on the skins of the kids on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. Then she handed the savory food and the bread that she had prepared to her son Jacob. So he went in to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game so that you may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went up to his father Isaac, Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands, so he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring it to me, that I may eat of my son's game and bless you." So he brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him, and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers. May your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of his father Isaac, his brother Esau came in from his hunting. He also prepared savory food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, "Let my father sit up and eat of his son's game so that you may bless me." His father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" He answered, "I am your firstborn son, Esau." Then Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, and blessed he shall be." When Esau heard his father's words, he cried out with an exceeding great and bitter cry, and said to his father, "Bless me also, father." But he said, "Your brother came in deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing." Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and look, now he has taken away my blessing." Then he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have already made him your lord, and I have given him all his brothers as servants, and with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?" Esau said to him, "Have you only one blessing, father? Bless me also, father." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then his father answered him, "See, away from the fatness of the earth shall your home be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you break loose, you shall break his yoke from your neck." Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." But the words of her elder son Esau were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is consoling himself by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him a while, until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger against you turns away, and he forgets that what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" There is a juxtaposition between blessing and duplicity. Blessing has a tremendous power. It has gained more and more power. It is a connection from generation to generation. It's how the story continues from generation to generation. Father blesses son, who then blesses his son, who blesses his son, and blesses his son. So the eldest son blesses his eldest son, and his eldest son blesses his eldest son, and the story continues. And now there's a change. But the power of the blessing still remains. It's transformative. It gives the person who receives the blessing all the power, all the control. So you have the power and the tradition of the blessing, of how it's passed on from generation to generation to generation. And that's juxtaposed against an usurper. Duplicity. Jacob is not in that line, but he inserts himself in that line. He inserts himself in that line because through his mother, who has communicated with God, because he's destined to. So the destiny of the blessing meets the destiny of what God has destined. And those two destinies come in conflict. Jacob is duplicitous, but he's almost forced to be. His mother pulls him aside and tells him what to do. But Jacob is not completely the tool of Rebekah. Jacob has his own choice. When he is alone with Isaac, and Isaac asks him a question which Rebekah hadn't prepared him for, Jacob is able to lie to his face, lie to his father. When his father asks him, "How do you come back so quickly?" he says, Jacob's able to say without any hesitation, "Because the Lord has brought me success," which is a lie. But this blessing doesn't come without conflict. And that conflict comes immediately and severe. Immediately after Jacob receiving the blessing, Isaac comes in, and when he is rejected for the blessing that by all things says is rightfully his, he pledges, he swears an oath to kill Jacob. So Jacob's life is immediately in danger. There's a conflict immediately. Jacob, in doing what he is destined to do, is immediately put into conflict, into trouble, and he has to flee. And so it seems like the very blessing that he receives seems to be a false blessing, because he doesn't get to stay and enjoy the blessing within the family. He has to run away. This is the twist that's going on in the story. And this is what Jacob has to work out in Jacob's relationship with God is, God, you blessed me, you've destined me. Why do I have to fight so much? Why does it have to be so hard? Very often, this is what makes Jacob the most human of all the characters, because very often we ask the same question. God, you love me. I know you love me. You're there for me. Why is it so hard? Jacob becomes a living representative of that. It happens, the drama happens in 4 scenes. The first scene is Isaac with Esau. Second scene is Rebekah with Jacob. Third scene is Jacob with Isaac. The fourth scene is Isaac and Esau again. It's an inscrutable blessing and a dangerous future. The blessing is inscrutable because on one hand it doesn't seem to be a blessing, it seems to be more almost a burden. Jacob, upon receiving blessing, has his life is in danger. He has to run. It doesn't seem like much of a blessing, but it is a blessing, and it is transformative because it changes his life. And what we'll see throughout the rest of the narrative is that Jacob will receive blessing upon blessing upon blessing. He will become a rich and powerful man. He will have lots of children. He will be the patriarch of Israel. From him will come a mighty nation. But it doesn't come without conflict. It doesn't come without constant having to plot and scheme and cheat and do whatever he can in order to make it work. Systematic theology approach, cosmology. The only supernatural things going on here seems to be, again, the issue of barrenness comes up with God coming. Eschatology, or the end times, what happens when we die, that comes up where Jacob's life is threatened. Isaac's life is in a certain way threatened. There's certain things that are going to happen to us in the future we can't know, and it's kind of out of our control, but it's also in our control. Ethics. Jacob's ethics are less than reputable. He is kind of the ironic hero. In epistemology, how do we know what is true? That's the question. That becomes question. How do we know what is true? In the sense of we feel blessed by God, but on the other hand, that blessing sometimes doesn't feel like a blessing. So sometimes we are chasing after the truth. Critical themes, inscrutable nature of God. Sometimes it's hard for us to understand what God has planned for us, and the tension between need and faith. What we need is sometimes doesn't always match up with what our faith tells us we should do. I've talked long enough. My voice is almost gone. Any questions?